it's better to be bad than to be boring, right? At the core of that is the concept of risk taking, right? Because if you're so cautious and careful, then you never do anything interesting. Whereas if you're willing to take some risk, you might be bad. And if you take enough risks and they're diversified enough, then you'll definitely be interesting.
I'm Nick Dyment, and this is the Electric Mindset.
You want to be the person in the room who asks the most questions.
There's no shortage of problems to tackle.
Where's the change part? Where's the people part you talked about?
This is going to be one of those moments of history that we're going to look back on.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Electric Mindset, where we're talking AI, business transformation, and technology, and how it's all coming together in this modern age. I'm your host, Nick Dyment of electricmind, an AI-forward consulting firm that's driving the change of digital transformation. I'm here with my beautiful guest, Chris, who I've known for a very long time. Very excited. Chris Ford, managing partner, CEO of electricmind, also known as the boss. Got lots of different nicknames. We'll save some for later. Chris, welcome, man.
Thanks. It's great to be here.
Yeah.
Looking forward to this.
Yeah, me too. So today, we're talking some shop about, AI. We want to learn about you. We want to understand some business trends and maybe some social trends too that are all, current at top of mind for people.
Yeah, let's do it. Let's dive into it.
Well, let's start with you, man. So people don't know you as well as I do. What's the number one thing people should know about you?
Oh, geez. So many things to pick from. You know that question you get asked sometimes in meetings or like in, socials where they say, what's the fun fact about you? Mm-hmm. I really struggle with that. I don't know if there's anything fun about me. I love just reading and consuming business and political content. So sometimes I think my fun fact is that I don't have a fun fact. It's a development area for sure.
Very safe answer. Okay.
I wasn't trying to be safe, but
yeah, that's fair. So now we're running a pretty successful shop in Toronto, but
yeah, I think so.
I know a bit of your backstory, kind of some humble roots. How did you get started in the world of tech consulting?
Sure. So I feel like before I go there, I should tell our listening audience that Nick and I actually did the same degree at university together. We both went to Waterloo and did engineering degrees, which is probably why we like each other so much.
I think so.
But yeah, I did an engineering degree in the late 90s. And what was happening in the late 90s was the internet. And by the time I got to second or third year, I couldn't wait to stop studying and to get out into the world and to start, driving change, because I thought the internet was going to just change everything. So I stuck around and, finished my thermodynamics courses and graduated in 1999, which was like the peak of the .com. Mm-hmm. And I remember my very first job was with Dyment, who interestingly we compete with now, but listen, they're a great business, great firm. Mm-hmm. Still have a lot of friends there. And they pulled me out of training on my second day and sent me to New York, and I didn't come back for 3 years. And I built websites and did e-commerce and all of that stuff. And 20 years later, I feel like I'm still doing the same thing, is taking technology and then making things more interesting and vibrant and innovative for all kinds of organizations and businesses. So really love what I do.
Must have been nice. I graduated right before the global financial crisis and had a bit of a different start.
Yeah,
it was tricky, but it was.
You know what they say, when you graduate or you enter the workforce at these troughs or these low points, mm-hmm. that you never actually catch up to where you're supposed to be, no matter how hard you work. So it ends up being quite punitive.
Yeah, and I'm feeling the effects of that now, riding in the wake of where I came out. So,
geez, I can't remember the last time you got promoted. You're a bit stalled out, aren't you?
It's true.
Maybe this podcast is going to turn things around for you.
I'm excited. Well,
we can hope for that.
We'll work in an open promotion conversation here live on camera.
Listen, I know you probably want to ask me some more interesting questions than just about me. But the other thing that I feel like I should say is that I really do identify first as a software developer and as an engineer. Like I was a programmer for many, many years. Mm-hmm. I wasn't a natural. I was terrible at it initially, but I hung in there and eventually I think got fairly good at it. Mm-hmm. But then graduated to, doing other things as well. But still, I first and foremost do identify as a technologist. And I think that's really important. There's a lot of people at electricmind that feel the same way. And it's one of the things I love about the people and the company.
Yeah. I would define myself as a problem solver before a developer, which is why I'm loving all these new AI tools, because I can get the products that I have in my mind and my ideas kind of into the world faster. How are you taking advantage of
That's
AI
great.
tooling?
There's lots of people out there creating problems, so we need people. We need people who can solve them.
Yeah. But for yourself, I mean, we're at this kind of neat point where there's a lot of productivity tools featuring AI that are coming out. We're taking advantage at work.
You want to talk about AI?
Yeah.
We're like 6 minutes into this podcast, and it took us that long to start talking about AI. Listen, I kind of joke, right? Because certainly in consulting right now, it's the topic that anybody and everybody wants to talk about. And it has very quickly become an important part of our business. So happy to talk about AI. Happy to not talk about AI, but
Sure. Well, I'd love to. So Chris, what's your favorite podcast?
so I found this guy, Scott Galloway, last year. And he's actually become steadily more and more popular. So he's a marketing professor at New York University, and he has a whole series of podcasts that he does. And I think he's just terrific. Mostly talks about business and politics, which I'm passionate about both topics. But I think the reason why I love the podcast is that, like, super intelligent guy, super articulate, doesn't take himself too seriously, likes to have a good time, great sense of humor. So you just listen, you're entertained, you learn. So it's terrific. If you haven't checked him out, I think you should. I actually like his philosophy, his ideology as well. I think he's, his heart's in the right place. So anyway, if we can be 5% as good as Scott Galloway in this podcast, then I think that's a success.
Well, maybe we're not raging moderates. We're just kind of fuming moderates.
Yeah.
So,
Okay.
fair. So I want to talk about electricmind. That's a newer name for the company, something that has been rolling around your brain for a little bit. Why the name?
2+ years.
Yeah. Why electricmind?
Yeah. So I'll never forget this. So as you get to my age, you start to not sleep as well as you used to. So I occasionally have insomnia. And I remember I was in Jacksonville, and we were doing work, or I was doing work at the time for FIS, and I couldn't sleep one night in the hotel. And I literally had insomnia from like midnight to like 5 a.m. And this name, Electric Mind, it somehow crept into my vocabulary. And so I kept thinking about it, and I kept thinking about all the things we could derive from it and why I liked it. And so I would try to sleep and roll over and then write something down and then roll back over, try to sleep. And then 5 hours later, I was exhausted, but I still really liked the name. Funny thing is I came back to Toronto and I started telling people, and they said, that's a horrible name. Like, please do not name anything that, much less your company. But, here we are 2 years later, and we're living with it.
Yeah. Well, I think we're growing with it too. Like Chris in this podcast, The Electric Mindset, this is the first one, of many. So if you're joining us, we've got a whole series ahead. We'll be sharing opinions and thoughts, getting to know some of the leaders at the company and understanding, how we're putting technology to work for our clients.
Yeah. There's a lot riding on this podcast, because if people listen to this one and they think it's totally boring, then we're probably not going to get a lot of listenership for the next one.
It's true. And as we've discussed, promotion really counts on getting extended for season 2.
I'm feeling the pressure right now.
So let's not screw this up.
All right.
Anything else that you want people to know about you, your background?
No, I don't think so. Let's talk about what's going on out there in the world and what some of our opinions are. Like, I think I'm the oldest guy who's going to be on your podcast
in season 1.
So
we'll find some older people in season 2.
Okay, I have a few suggestions.
Okay, great.
But despite my age, my ideas are youthful and energetic. So yeah, happy to talk about those.
Yeah, I think segues nicely from the name. Like you don't shy away from being a bit disruptive and riling people up and being controversial. And some people think you're putting it on, but I think it's pretty genuine. How do you...
Wait, some people think I'm putting it on?
Sorry to tell you.
Let's get those names written down. I might have to do some work for shade.
Sure. But I think as part of your gift is you go into organizations and have no problem trying to disrupt. So what are maybe some of the conversations you've had lately where, you're pushing the envelope on some old thinking?
Yeah. So as I was listening to you, the phrase that comes to mind that I heard last year, probably on a podcast, was it's better to be bad than to be boring. Right. And at the core of that is the concept of risk taking. Right. Because if you're so cautious and careful, then you never do anything interesting. Whereas if you're willing to take some risk, you might be bad. And if you take enough risks and they're diversified enough, then you'll definitely be interesting. So I think that's important because a lot of what happens out there is boring. It really is. I find that people are afraid to really experiment with ideas and with concepts because it's just much easier to be boring. I think a little bit of that is our identity as Canadians.
Yeah.
I think we need to be less boring.
Well, that's a bigger topic. How do we shift the narrative to be, I don't know.
Yeah.
What is your vision for Canadians? Maybe we'll go there.
And I'm still pretty boring, by the way. Like, remember my fun fact is that I don't have a fun fact.
Sure.
So, I'm being critical of us as a nation, myself included. But yeah, sorry, I was just apologizing to the audience for maybe inadvertently insulting everybody.
It's very Canadian of you.
What was your question?
What I want to know is you get to have conversations with executive leaders and FIs and large companies. So you're really kind of getting the thinking that we're going to find out as Canadians, 3, 4, 5 years later when these products and services come to market. So yeah, what are you noticing are some patterns in the conversations that you're having?
One of the things that I'm really pleased to see is in the 20 years that I've been doing this. So when you graduated in the 2000s, which was a terrible time to graduate, and again, you have my deepest sympathies. The technology really was, everybody's mad at technologists because the internet and the .com overpromised. Everything was going to change. Business was going to be better and easier. We were all going to be very rich and live in this prosperous future. And then people ran out of patience. The whole thing collapsed. And the next 10 years, technologists paid the price because business people are like, listen, we're fed up with that. We're going to focus on business. Technology, the cost, it's a necessary expense, but it's really not something that we see as differentiating for our business. That's completely changed now, at least for most forward-looking businesses, completely changed. Now people see technology as the strategic advantage and the differentiator. Something that we like to say a lot at electricmind is technology has become intrinsic to business. Marshall McLuhan, famous Canadian, always said the medium is the message. Well, now the medium is technology, right? So another way of thinking about it is like, technology, the way the product or service is being delivered by technology is the product. So that phrase we use a lot, technology being intrinsic to business, and more business people are embracing that, which elevates sort of the status of technologists and engineers within organizations, which is a healthy thing. I think it puts a more of an onus on technologists to really lean into and learn the business. And be a partner to the business. But I think it's really exciting times. So unlike when you graduated, now is probably a great time to graduate because we're at the beginning of something, or maybe not the beginning, but we're in the early innings of something that I think is pretty profound.
Yeah. I remember talking to a leader at one of the banks and had a philosophical question. Are you a bank that does, has to support technology because you need to, or are you a tech company that offers banking services? And I was just kind of playing around.
Pretty existential question, eh?
Well, I don't know. I was curious.
What did they say?
I was curious. Well, this person was like, no, we're a bank first and foremost. And I thought that was kind of lame. So I'm glad that there's more of a technology focused because, it really is, an enabler for products these days, modern products.
So I really hope the person that you're referring to is not listening to or watching this.
I hope they are, and I hope they've shifted their thinking. They've shifted their thinking as time goes on.
On these things, there really isn't a right answer, right?
Yeah.
Like it's okay to have diverging points of view, and depending on the point in time and what the challenges you're facing, you need to amp it up or amp it down. But yeah, generally speaking, it's exciting times and a good time to be a technologist.
So. We don't know who's going to watch this thing. It's the first episode, but let's say you are one of these young people and you're thinking about your next steps. What should you be focusing on to set you up for success, say 5 years from now?
Yeah. So the thing that I tell people most consistently is be curious. You want to be the person in the room who asks the most questions. And I find a lot of people aren't curious enough, or maybe they're afraid to be curious, or they don't want to impose upon people by asking questions. But I really think it's the best thing that you can do. is just be curious about the world. And, I tell people on our projects, if you show up on a project and your role is to be a product owner or a scrum master, you want to knock it out of the park in terms of, delivering the mail on that role, but lift your head up and look around. Like, what are other people doing? What's the purpose and the rationale behind the project? And like, in an unconstrained way, how can you in your role make maximum impact? So I really encourage people to do that. And if you do that, I think you're going to have a great career. And I think that people, because it's not as common, I think that it's differentiating. So a lot of people also ask me how to get promoted. And that's part of my answers usually as well is, don't let your current role and level start with your curiosity. Don't let it constrain your curiosity.
Yeah. And piggybacking off that, since we have no idea again who's going to be watching this thing, let's say there's change agents at some large corporates out there. They got a big budget and they've got a mandate to drive change within the organization, do some transformation. What advice would you have for them?
Geez, that question's pretty situational. I think, another thing that we say a lot at Electric Mind is like technology projects really have most of the time very little to do with technology. It's usually about people, process, hearts, minds, politics, finances. There's so many other there's so much context that makes the actual technology a small part of getting any change done. Yeah. So it's really hard to answer that question, I think, in the abstract. But what I will say is like, no matter who you are, if you're listening to this, if you're in services like we are, if you're in industry, that's a real universal problem and challenge.
Totally.
Technology is not going to make that easier. But a culture shift is what makes that easier, right? So people just being action oriented. I think a lot of the time we run into people who are so familiar with their organization and with the processes in that organization that the processes that are there to either protect the organization or to enable productivity, they don't really get used for those things. They become excuses for why work isn't getting done or can't be done faster. So I think that just having that awareness and saying, listen, these processes are here to enable the organization. If that's not what's happening, then I think people need to have the courage to say, listen, this just doesn't make sense. And to go to your boss and say, this doesn't make sense. And then leadership needs to respond and say, you're right, that doesn't make sense. How are we going to change this and do this differently? I'll give a shout out to one of our clients, TD Bank. So Ray Chun, who's the new CEO there, is really shaking things up. And he's making comments that sound a lot like the ones that I just made. Is that we don't have to tolerate bureaucracy and encumbrance. Bring your ideas to me. How can we be better and faster? And I think that's awesome to see somebody at his level willing to lean in and be focused on something like that.
Yeah. Listening to you there, it sounds like it's almost an extension of your advice for the young people. You want to be curious and courageous, but at a broader level, really. So it's kind of good. I like that.
Yeah.
So then there are a lot. I do want to bring it back a little bit to some AI and modern technology.
I was just thinking that, I made a joke at the beginning that we're not talking about AI, or it took us 6 minutes to talk about AI, and then we kind of forgot about it for 20 minutes. And
well, I'm bringing it back. That's what
a good host does, right? Yeah.
So I want to bring it back to AI here for a minute, and curious. There's been a massive boom in the tooling that AI is providing that I think these big organizations can take advantage of. So in your conversations with leaders at these, big, large corporates and FIs, what are you hearing?
Yeah, so I think you said earlier that you've always had some cynicism towards AI, and I have to admit, so have I. But I'm that way about all technology because even though I'm a technologist, whether it's professional software firms or consulting firms, we're always trying to antagonize our clients into doing something and spending money with us. So we really get ahead of ourselves with the hype. We really push the hype with customers, and usually it precedes the actual maturity of the technology for adoption. But AI and specifically Gen AI really has been a step change and really has been explosive. And it's taken me some time to really fully process what I think it means to our clients and what it means to our business. But I'm kind of increasingly confident in my opinions now. We really look at it two ways as the leadership at electricmind. There's how are we going to build solutions for our clients that directly leverage the latest AI capabilities. So the AI itself becomes part of the technology footprint at the organizations we work with, but which is very interesting. But where I'm seeing an even more profundity, if you will, is just in the way that we work. Right, opportunities to do the same work faster, quicker, with better quality. And just, I said curious earlier, we've got a lot of very curious people in the company that have been willing to go in and experiment and then come back and share those experiences and teach the rest of us. And that, I think, is just, that's been an amazing thing to see. And because I did do some preparation for this podcast, I actually have three examples that I want to share with you and your listeners, if that's okay.
Oh, that's fantastic, because real world examples are the best examples. So yeah, I'd love, Chris, to hear an example of, AI being used in the real world to drive productivity.
Yeah. So I think that, so what I'm going to talk about is how I think AI is going to disrupt what's often called global delivery. So technology work that's delivered in lower cost geographies like India, Philippines, China, Brazil. So I'm going to talk about that. Next, I'm going to talk about how I think Gen AI is disrupting traditional business consulting. So management consulting per se, the big four, our own work, the work that we would do in advisory practice. That I think is ripe for disruption. And then the third one is professional software. So buying off-the-shelf vendor software, I think, is fundamentally changing as well. So the three examples that support each of those areas are, we had one of our clients come to us and say, listen, we've got a bunch of legacy technology that we use for data and integration, and it's become back level. It's difficult to maintain. We've lost agility because of the legacy nature of the tech. And normally what they would do is probably, offshore the work and find, 100 people in a lower cost geography to just beaver away and muscle through it. But what we're in the process of doing right now is trying to demonstrate that actually with a much smaller team of people supervising the Gen AI, we can do all of the analysis of the content, or the code in this case, and then use that as input to then generate all the technical specifications, the code, the documentation, and so forth. So it's a very credible alternative to the brute force approach that we would typically take over the last 20 years. And that's something that we can really lean into as a business, because we're a smaller team, but we're mighty, right? We have great subject matter expertise. Yeah. And what we lack is that scale that, other businesses have via global delivery. But now we just don't need it because we can use the tech instead. So love that example. Another example in business consulting, a lot of the types of artifacts that you would typically create as part of a traditional consulting engagement, so much of that can now be driven and derived via Gen AI, especially things at an implementation level, like business process maps, functional specifications, user acceptance test cases, a lot of stuff that normally would be expensive to manually produce. We can produce much quicker. So that's great news for our customers. And then lastly, and this is the one that is the most recent one that again, I think is quite profound, is we're responding to RFPs that normally would only go to software companies. So instead, a customer needs a capability, and it would go to these, you go to Gartner, you go to Magic Quadrant, you look at what the preeminent suppliers are, you send it to them, and then you pick the best one based on value. Now, providers like electricmind, we can build a software product for you using generative AI as an accelerator, and we can build exactly what you need, no more, no less, versus buying a very complex piece of software that does a bunch of things you don't need it to do, mostly does the things that you need it to do, but requires a lot of expensive customization or tailoring or compromise. So I think that the custom software as a credible competitor in a lot of cases is really going to be game changing. So you look at in the services industry and you look at our customers and information-based businesses, you've got the talent model, the global delivery and talent model, traditional relationships with large management consulting and business consulting firms, and then actually buying professional software. All three of those things changing, all at the same time, just based on the introduction of this technology. It's pretty cool.
There's a lot going on. And in addition to hosting this podcast and being the chief of staff, I'm in a delivery role too. So I get a chance to see firsthand some of these changes, and when getting to generate sequence diagrams by taking a picture of a whiteboard, putting it into code, into Mermaid, and then being able to work with an LLM to really refine that, and be done with it in an afternoon is pretty powerful. And
okay, so what we should talk about is, aren't a bunch of people going to lose their jobs now because AI is going to replace people? I really think that's a very low probability. Like when we work with our clients, they're not constrained by the amount of work they have. It's not like we're going to show up and in February, we did all the work that needed done for the year and we're going to take the rest of the year off. There's always more work to do. So the available resources are just going to be, in my humble opinion, a lot busier and a lot more productive. And the unit outputs are going to increase in sort of number and quality. And we're just going to go faster. But nobody's going to slow down. Nobody's going to actually want to invest less in terms of resources, because if you don't, your competitor is going to, and you're going to get wiped out.
Yeah.
So I think that the quality of the work that human beings do is going to just continue to get better, right? Like we don't, dig quality of the earth manually, or there's a whole bunch of jobs we don't do anymore, because we can do higher value jobs, and that the Gen AI is just going to accelerate that trend.
I think as a business owner, I can totally appreciate the idea of having people be more productive. And as an employee, it'd be nice to be done in February and take the rest of the year off. But I think that...
Well, remember, you're still trying to catch up, Nick. You graduated at a terrible time. Like your career is already probably 5 to 10 years behind where you should be.
And I'm a bit of a fatalist, so I'm willing to just kind of lean in.
Yeah.
There's some good Xbox games coming out, and I'm ready for it. So,
I tried playing video games the other day, not the other day, but recently, and I thought these games must be so much better than they were when I was a teenager. And I was kind of disappointed. So
maybe you're playing the wrong ones.
I'm just not a fun person. We covered that.
Yeah. So, we're kind of touching on a few things. Like there is, we're changing the way we work, let's say generally as consultants. In our industry then, if clients, are learning that they can expect more, for the same or for less, how does that impact, consulting? Because we typically charge, time and materials. We're charging by the hour. So are we in danger? Am I in danger, Chris?
Well, we're still going to do that. We're just going to charge them more. No, and actually, I make that comment sort of flippantly. But, if we are able to demonstrate drastically improved productivity, then customers should be willing to pay more, per unit of work for what hopefully is a smaller team. Ultimately it's about value. So the value is there, then the value should be priced, based on what makes sense. Yeah. So we're definitely going to charge clients more.
Sweet. I think as a delivery person, being on the ground with a small team that knows their stuff, the work week flies by. You're talking with a client, you understand the domain, we can deliver a lot of stuff. It sounds salesy, but honestly, if I can get to Friday and see the changes, in the deployed environment, and QA can play around with stuff, and we're making progress, and the client's I actually don't like that. It changes the mood. I'm willing to have more fun with a smaller team, doing more. And
I think you're going to have more fun. And I think that because we're able to crank out more in a short amount of time, you see the impact of your work. Sometimes I'll tell people the first 3 projects I did in financial services were each 3-year programs. Yeah. And I did them one after another. So in 9 years, I worked on 3 projects. And, we delivered a lot over the course of those 9 years. But, sometimes you're working on something and there's some major, it's a platform conversion or modernization or a new launch of something, and you might work on it for 2 years before it sees the light of day.
Yeah.
And it's way more fun if you're able to actually deliver impact and get feedback much faster. And I think that, not just Gen AI, technology just overall is having that impact. Like, cloud certainly was able to do that too, right? To speed up. Like, it wasn't that long ago where the beginning of your project was like, okay, how many servers do we need in order to start development? And how many months is it going to take to order the servers and get them racked so that we can actually start doing something, right? We don't have those conversations anymore, which is a great thing because we can focus on actually doing the work and not these problematic dependencies.
So we're starting to forward look a little bit. So if you have a crystal ball, I don't see it here, but if metaphysical crystal ball, you're looking into it. It's 5 years, it's 10 years. What has changed? Let's start with consulting industry as a result of Gen AI and just the mindset shift of the clients.
Well, I'd start by saying that, like, I'm a huge optimist, right? I think you know that, and so are you, Nick, and that's one of your better qualities, one of your many good quality. But so I think that I view the future with a ton of optimism.
Okay.
Right, and the world is getting better. You talked about lots of reasons for why the world should get better. I'm not sure if I'm able to be a lot more specific than that.
That's fair.
At this point, like, the great thing about what we do is it is really hard to predict the future.
Yeah.
But that's what makes it an adventure. That's what makes it fun. Like, you get really smart people, really successful smart people, and they get it wrong all the time. Like Mark Zuckerberg. Do you remember the metaverse?
Barely.
That was not a great idea, right? But like, super intelligent person with tons of access to information, and it wasn't the right call. Elon Musk, God love him, he's been promising us fully autonomous cars for 10 years. Right? So even people with a track record for spectacular accomplishments have a hard time really predicting the future. So I'm self-aware, sufficiently self-aware to know that I'm probably going to get it wrong if I try. But I do know that things are going to get better.
Great. And, maybe for you then, rather than looking at the industry, just thinking about yourself, any of these changes, these new tools, changing the way that you are living your life day to day?
I don't know. Let me flip it back on you. Maybe you'll inspire me to say something interesting, but how would you answer your own question?
Yeah, I think that lots of little ways I'm taking advantage of different LLMs, ChatGPT. So I got 2 young boys, and their favorite thing in the world is to do a trivia bath. I don't know how this became a thing, but while they're in the bath, they like to be asked trivia questions. Huh. I have run out of everything that I know that I think is at their level of understanding. We've taken trivia books out of the library. I think we've burned through all of those.
Yeah.
So ChatGPT has been very good at coming up with trivia questions for young kids about a variety of topics. And I think my boys are taking advantage of that because they know all sorts of hummingbird facts, space facts. So little things like that. I remember being on a trip and it was a rainy day in a city I didn't know, and being able to ask very specific questions of, hey, it's rainy, I'm tired. Like, what should I get up to today to really maximize, being here? Yeah. So we have personalized advice. I have used it to help me, answer RFPs, like day-to-day work stuff, to organize my schedule, to help me, plan a date night. That was kind of embarrassing to say, but I'm always looking for good ideas. Got to keep it fresh. It's been 10 years.
Yeah.
So those are some of the ways that I'm taking advantage of LLMs kind of on the personal level.
Yeah, stumping your kids in the bathtub.
Exactly.
I like it. As I was listening to you, I was thinking, so sometimes I answer this. My favorite app is Duolingo. I'm learning Spanish. My vocabulary just crested 1,200 words.
Okay, perfecto.
But I really do love the app. It's great. But one of the things that I tell, really everybody who will listen is what I say, listen, it's important to find purpose in your work, and what we do at electricmind, and then how what we do for our clients is landing and having purpose. And so I'll tell people, I say, listen, when I was growing up, my parents, if they needed to pay the utility bill, like they had to write a check and mail it to the utility company, or go into the bank and stand in line and actually pay the bill. So think about all the time that people in a previous era spent doing stuff like that. And now they don't. We don't even think about it, right? Because it takes seconds to do it, if it even takes that long, which means you have that time back to do something better, right? Like stump your kids in the bathtub with trivia. So I think that just the quality of the time we have and how we spend it is constantly improving. And I get a ton of purpose from that.
Yeah.
Every time we do something for clients, we're making it easier for the employees. We're making it easier for customers of that organization. And that's making the world a better place, because it's improving the quality of the time it's giving us back more time, and improving the quality of the time that we do spend on things. Like we're on less time on the ordinary, more time to be curious.
Yeah. I love that. I love that optimism. There's also a bit of the promise. I remember reading maybe an old National Geographic when dishwashers came out. The promise was it's going to save, all this time, and you'll have time to do other things. And I guess we filled that time with more and more.
I kind of like washing dishes, though.
My dad got rid of his dishwasher.
Yeah?
Yeah.
I find it very satisfying to wash dishes.
We work in a team and we talk. I don't know.
I don't like drying dishes, though.
Yeah. Maybe not a great
dry,
example.
but
all right. I did want to remind you, because the title of this podcast is AI or Bust: Why Enterprises Struggle to Implement AI Effectively. So I have been trying my best to weave some questions in about that.
Okay, so I'm just going to run with your prompt, because one of the things that I've been saying a lot lately, and I'm hoping that somebody eventually either tells me I'm wrong or starts listening and takes my advice. But so cloud computing. When cloud came out, a lot of our customers were very fearful. They're like, wait a minute, we can't possibly put our data or our critical systems and infrastructure in the cloud, because that seems unsafe. So this is in an era where, a lot of big organizations operated or leased their own data centers, and they felt very comfortable and safe knowing that their data was within their control and protected. And so, I don't know, it was a bit like 10 years we spent doing private cloud. So we took cloud technology and we implemented it privately within what was perceived to be our control and in our data centers. All right, so now, fast forward to now. Nobody does that anymore. Everybody has accepted that cloud is actually a safe thing to do. Technology really hasn't changed. Same technology that we had before. We just got comfortable with our understanding of it and the risk. Now you look at AI. So AI requires incredible amounts of compute. The best and most convenient way to access the latest AI is via public cloud. So what do you think that most of our clients are saying? They're saying, we cannot possibly do that. Okay, that sounds like a terrible risk, right?
Yeah.
Does this sound familiar? So what we're doing is private LLMs. So just like we did private cloud, now we're saying, okay, how can we stand up our own instance so that we have control and data is not going to leak outside of the environment? And I'm kind of watching this and going, guys, can we just not skip this step? Like remember what happened with cloud? Can we just skip this step this time? But unfortunately, we're probably not going to skip this step, or maybe the step will be shorter than it was the last time. But you talk about adoption of Gen AI and cloud. There's a lot of fear out there, and there's a lot of risk elimination that happens. But sometimes if you really think, okay, what's the worst thing that can happen? Okay, and if that worst thing did happen, what would it really mean in terms of the impact of the business? Like another thing that I say, which is very unpopular, is in cybersecurity space. Like large corporates take it extremely seriously, and they should. But sometimes the amount of money that we spend trying to reduce the risk to zero is not that last mile. That money is not well spent. Because if you look at organizations that have been breached, well, first of all, everybody's been breached. And customers don't seem to really care, like all the Canadian banks have had serious breaches. Have you pulled your money out of them? No. People,
I know you have a Yahoo email account. So.
Maybe about it takes about a week and people forget and they move on.
Yeah.
So if you actually look at the materiality of the worst case risk in some of these situations, I think it's a helpful experiment to say, okay, so what? What if that does happen? Because look at the opportunity that we're ignoring or delaying because we're worried about that worst case risk. So I just think the framing and the thinking about risk. One of my favorite people at a large organization said, everybody here is empowered to say no. Nobody's empowered to say yes. And that's just very much a cultural thing that you see in a lot of big corporates, right? And if you're the one person who says yes, there's not a lot in it for you because everybody's going to remember it was that guy's fault.
Yeah.
So, back to culture change and back to thing, I think, a lot of people will probably relate to what I'm saying. But I also know that I'm simplifying things and it's not as simple as, let's just march out there and just start acting differently. It's a little more complicated than that.
Sure. But your point makes a lot of sense. They say history doesn't repeat, but it rhymes. So, we're trusted allies of lots of big companies. How can we coach? I like your example. The steps are going to be there, but we maybe want to minimize this humming and hawing step of tiptoeing around being able to take full advantage of these models. What could we do to help coach some of these big orgs through there?
I think one, we're there to service our clients and to help enable them and to give them as many options as possible, right? To stimulate their thinking, to challenge the thinking sometimes, but ultimately, we are there in support of the client and their organization and what they're trying to accomplish. So, one of the things that we're investing in right now is we'll probably be the first consulting company, at least in Canada, that has its own private cloud AI capability. So at our office, we're investing in, servers and GPUs so that we can run some of the larger models. And that way we can say to clients, listen, if you're not comfortable doing this in the public domain and in public cloud, and you don't have the time or the infrastructure to set something up that's secure, then we perhaps can offer that to you as an alternative. So again, I think it's about providing options for our customers, respecting what their constraints are, challenging them sometimes as well, and giving them the support sometimes so that they can challenge internally. But yeah, I think just being respectful and providing options is what we have to do.
Right. So I got one big question before we kind of close it out here, looking at the time. So we're talking about organizations. We're talking about our company. I want to go broader. We just had an election in Canada here, and there's a lot of campaign promises and a lot of talk, big energy. I feel like kind of, again, with Canada, we're playing it safe. What are our opportunities or risk of missed opportunities?
Okay, so what I'm hearing here is like, Chris, I've given you lots of opportunities to offend people who are listening to this.
Yes. I want you to go big.
So let's go with politics and let's see if we can offend the few people who may not have already been offended. Okay, let me do my best with that. All right. So first of all, I'm like you, I'm very proud Canadian, right? So I was one of the first students at Waterloo in engineering to work in Silicon Valley in the 90s. And I could easily have stayed there, but listen, I love Canada. I love our values. I love what's important to us as a country. So I came back. I love the US too, but this is home. I think that what we're seeing with the U.S. politics and how that's affecting us economically with tariffs, a big part of me is thankful because I think that we need a bit of a kick, right? We are an incredibly rich country. We have so much going for us. I think that we need to be more innovative, more productive. Our productivity has really fallen behind the U.S. if you look at the numbers. Yeah. There's no good reason for that. And I think that the kind of work that we do, so information-based technology, services, Canada needs to be a global leader in that space. And so for what it's worth, we're doing our part at electricmind. A great example is healthcare. A lot of people at the company are really passionate about healthcare. We don't do a lot of work in healthcare right now, But, Canada's healthcare system is envied around the world. It's actually a great system. It's not perfect, but there's a lot of things that are terrific about it. Why shouldn't we be a global leader in software information services related to healthcare? And there are some businesses that do that, but we could be doing a lot more. That's one of our strengths and advantages. We've got great natural resources, but our healthcare system, I think, is one of our natural resources, and we should be leveraging that as part of having a global impact.
Yeah. How can we export that goodness to the rest of the
So
world?
if you're listening to this and you run a hospital or you work for the Ministry of Health, call us.
Yeah.
We want to work with you.
No, definitely. That would be a lot of fun. A lot of purpose in that work too.
Yeah. Especially Eddie Phillips.
Yeah.
Shout out to Eddie. He loves healthcare.
Yeah.
And Tony too.
He'll be on the show
No kidding.
coming up soon. Yeah.
Okay, you should tell him I mentioned it. He'll probably like that.
He will. Okay. Before we go to some closeout questions, anything that you wanted to say that I didn't prompt you for?
I just think you're doing a great job.
Wow.
You're a natural.
I'm trying my best. Okay, so wrapping up, we're going to move to lightning round. Your goal is to say as few words as possible. After you get the question, I got a couple questions for you. Okay, it doesn't have to be one word. It can be a few. It can't be a paragraph. With me?
Okay.
Okay, lightning round. Let's go. Your favorite tool, underrated strategy, and best advice for teams getting started.
Build personal relationships with each other.
What's one thing you've read, listened to, or watched lately that's shaped your thinking?
I mentioned already, but I love listening to the Professor G. Scott Galloway podcast.
Great. And maybe a bonus one. Most recent book you read?
A Dick Francis book.
Okay.
So written 50 years ago. So he's a jockey in England, and he retired from being a jockey, and he writes like crime fiction.
Oh, fun.
But the book's probably 70 years old.
Cool.
Yeah, but that's the honest answer. That's the last book I read. It's not anything more enlightened than that.
That's fine. I'll give you a pass on the one word because I was very curious. So,
Okay.
all right. So, Chris, where can people find out more about you?
So you can follow me on Twitter, now X, at CBFord. You can email me at chris@electricmind.com. Those are probably two best ways to find me.
Great.
And I'm in the office a lot. 200 Adelaide Street. Come pay us a visit.
Thanks again for tuning in to Electric Mindset. I'm your host, Nick Dyment. If you liked what you heard here, like, subscribe, tell your friends, put it on the net, let other people know about it. It's been my pleasure having you. I'm Nick at electricmind.com. And if you want to find out more about the company, go to electricmind.com. And Chris?
Thanks, Nick. This was a lot of fun.
Great. And until next time, I'm Nick Dyment. Stay bold, stay curious. The future's bright.
We're out.
All right. Peace. A-Town down.